Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Laura Cohen, and I'm the Executive Director of the Harriet and Kenneth Kupferberg Holocaust Center at Queensborough Community College at the City University of New York in Bayside, Queens. Our mission is to use the lessons of the Holocaust to educate current and future generations about the ramifications of prejudice, racism, and stereotyping. Today's talk is entitled Dramatic Engagement, the Arts in Holocaust Education, and features Dr. Janet Rubin, Assistant Professor in the Departments of Visual and Performing Arts, Humanities, and Speech at Eastern Florida State College, and she'll discuss how the power of theater can be harnessed within the classroom to encourage a deeper understanding of the Holocaust while directly connecting students with survivors. The Kupferberg Holocaust Center in Bayside, New York is situated on the traditional land of the Mantinecock people who continue to live here today. We offer gratitude and respect to all of the Indigenous people of Turtle Island, past, present, and future, including the Lenape and Shinnecock peoples. What I just read is what we call a land acknowledgement. This is a statement recognizing that the land we all occupy in the course of our daily lives, including our schools, jobs, parks, and homes, as well as the names of towns and roads, was first inhabited by another group of people who were forcibly expelled and murdered. Today, we identify those crimes for what they are: mass atrocities and genocide. These horrors continue to have devastating political, social, psychological, economic, and environmental impacts upon and within Native American and Indigenous communities. Our event today is part of the 2022-23 KHC and National Endowment for the Humanities Colloquium entitled Trauma, Remembrance, and Compassion. It's also connected to the KHC's latest virtual and in-person exhibition entitled The Concentration Camps: Inside the Nazi System of Incarceration and Genocide. Our event today is co-sponsored by the Center for the Study of Genocide and Human Rights at Rutgers University, the Ray Walpole Institute for the Study of Holocaust, Genocide, and Crimes Against Humanity at Western Washington University, the Sam and Francis Freed Holocaust and Genocide Academy at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, and the Nancy and David Wolf Holocaust and Humanities Center. After the presentation, please be sure to submit your questions via the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And now to kick things off, please join me in welcoming Dr. Jody Vanderhoorn Gibson, who's an associate professor in the Department of Communication, Theater, and Media Production at Queensborough Community College. Dr. Vanderhoorn Gibson received her PhD in theater from Arizona State University and has taught a broad range of theater, film, and communication courses in the New York City region. Her research focuses primarily on representations of race and gender in pop culture, as well as developing equitable and inclusive practices for the classroom. She's also presented her research at regional, national, and international conferences and has published work in theater, film, and communication. Dr. Vanderhoorn Gibson, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Laura. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. Very excited to introduce to you all Dr. Janet E. Rubin, who currently teaches at Eastern Florida State College. She teaches communication and theater and directs productions there. Formerly, she was professor of theater at Saginaw Valley State University in Michigan, where she was the recipient of numerous awards, including the Earl L. Warwick Award for Excellence in Research, the Rush Distinguished Lectureship, and the Barstow Humanities Seminar Directorship. Dr. Rubin frequently presents her work at conferences around the world, and she is a respected scholar, theatrical director, teacher, consultant, and arts educator who has published numerous books and numerous articles. Among her publications related to Holocaust education and the arts are Teaching About the Holocaust Through Drama, Voices Playing for Studying the Holocaust and Enacting History, A Practical Guide to Teaching the Holocaust Through Theater, the latter co-authored with Mira Hirsch and Arnold Middleman. She was a visiting fellow at the Center for Advanced Holocaust Studies at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and has served as educator in residence at the University of Mysore in India and at Ballarat College of Advanced Education in Victoria, Australia. She has been a panel member for the National Endowment for the Arts and is a past president of the American Alliance for Theater and Education, a national professional organization for theater educators and artists. She received her PhD from The Ohio State University. And Dr. Rubin, thank you so much for being here with us today. And the floor is yours.
Thank you so very much. For many young people, the 6 million Jews and 5 million others who were murdered during the Holocaust are unimaginable numbers. It's important, therefore, that we teach not only about the history of the Holocaust, but also about the humanity. Those lost were not numbers, they were people. And learning about the Holocaust, therefore, is an opportunity to learn about people and what happened to them, both during and in the aftermath of the Holocaust. Because the arts are vehicles for human expression, they provide ways to explore human behavior, to individualize life experiences, to critically look at values, and to personalize relationships. Through them, active learning and critical thinking are fostered. When related to Holocaust education, they invite engagement with subject matter that is difficult and complex. Human behavior can be complicated, and the arts are a way to teach learners about the Holocaust, which is complicated subject matter. The Holocaust study, when used with the arts, can teach about actions, perspectives, values, attitudes that resulted in one of humankind's darkest periods. They're tools for understanding how and why such destruction took place on such an unprecedented scale. By partnering education with learning about the Holocaust, history moves from facts and figures to intellectually and emotionally engaging ways of understanding. Through carefully planned and implemented instruction, there are vehicles through which students can reach distant places, develop understanding of the past, and make meaningful and personal connections to people and to their experiences. The need for teaching about the Holocaust is critical. Those who actually experienced it will not be with us much longer. They are aging. In a disturbing parallel, knowledge about the Holocaust also is diminishing. On a January 27th, 2023 PBS NewsHour broadcast, John Yang noted this: "Despite the pledge to never forget, never again, there are signs that Americans' knowledge about the Holocaust is wanting. A new survey for the American Jewish Committee found that only 26% of those questioned could correctly answer 4 questions about the magnitude of the Holocaust and its origins. Only 53% of those over 18 could correctly answer that about 6 million Jews were killed. And 34% said that Hitler came to power by overthrowing the German government. In fact, he was democratically elected, an answer that only 39% were able to give. Education is the key to making sure that never again is more than just a slogan. But teaching about the Holocaust can be challenging. Today's students are influenced by social media, where misinformation and Holocaust denial can thrive. They see that anti-Semitism is on the rise, but they may not be aware of its dangers. And in classrooms where Holocaust education is mandated, teachers often lack the training and the resources to effectively teach the subject matter. Finding ways to interest students in an event that for them might seem like ancient history is a formidable task. How can something of the magnitude of the Holocaust be comprehended? How can we help young people to understand that the 6 million Jews and the 5 million others who were murdered, as well as the suffering of countless more, represent the sacrifice and slaughter of individuals? How can they move beyond the constraints of contemporary existence to grasp the thinking and the events that made the Holocaust possible? The arts are not the only answer, but they are an important one. Whether it be visual arts, music, dance, literature, or drama theater, the arts can motivate students, encourage creative and critical thinking, and bring unique perspectives and inspirations. They can provide opportunities for students to be transported to other times and places, to make interdisciplinary connections, to experience history, and to empathize with others. In terms of increasing learning opportunities, their value is significant. Not only do they have merit in their own right, but they're vehicles for making connections between and among other subjects, and for encouraging students to probe deeply and to think reflectively. Many concepts that are relevant to young people today may seem difficult, but they are not impossible to connect to the Holocaust. Some students experience violence in their schools or on the streets where they live. Some are victims of stereotyping and prejudice. For certain adolescents and teenagers, peer pressure is an important factor. And the peer pressure can replace independent and critical thinking. They want to be accepted. We need to understand that the Holocaust had at its foundation hatred and racial prejudice, and the desirability of belonging to groups like the Hitler Youth, or being seen as a member of the master race. So these are a few of the connections that can be made between teens' lives now and what happened during the Holocaust. Learning about the Holocaust can help young people to learn about themselves and about other people. When, through deliberate learning experiences, student focus is directed to issues of tolerance, empathy, sensitivity, responsible citizenship, uses of technology, scapegoating, and independent thinking, the applicability to Holocaust lessons is apparent. Through these, students can be better prepared to connect their own experiences to what happened during the Holocaust, to distinguish truth from lie, to recognize and to act against injustice, and to make important correlations to themselves and their experiences. I'm a theater director and educator, and so with apologies to the other arts, I'm going to focus now primarily on drama and theater in Holocaust education. Drama is active. Through plays and informal drama activities, students can broaden their scope of understanding. They learn by doing. When applied to studying the Holocaust, dramatic activity personalizes and brings immediacy to content. History moves from facts and figures to an intellectually and emotionally engaging set of stories about people. It takes on a more human dimension. If we recognize the characters and conflict are essential to drama, then we immediately see their value when studying about the Holocaust. The stories of those who lived and died embody the conflicts of man against man against nature, man against himself, and man against ideology. Both formal and informal drama activities offer both artistic and educational resources. Given the breadth and scope of subject matter, settings, and themes that can be explored dramatically, this methodology also expands opportunities for learning and for linking to curriculum. Using drama and theater to study the Holocaust invites partnerships with English, history, sociology, and science. Students, whether they are exploring issues of personal responsibility or investigating the Nazis' use of technology, when using this approach, are learning actively and thinking independently. These activities do more than make subject matter come alive. They offer innovative methods for meeting objectives, and they encourage participants to analyze, to synthesize, to empathize, to act, and to reflect. How can a young person see the Holocaust as something other than an event that happened as ancient history? It happened before they were born. When they owned cell phones and computers, how can they relate to a world in which victims were not able to listen to or even own a radio? When goods were not moved in moving vans, but rather carried in wagons or carts or in bundles during relocations to ghettos. Through drama, young people can understand that the Holocaust was a human event, and they relate to individuals, the good and the bad, to experience history more directly. To illustrate this point, I'd like to share with you an activity that I use in my theater and theater education classes. In theater, one of the ways in which an actor analyzes a character is to ask, how is this character like me, and how is this character unlike me? The monologues that I'll share with you are from James Still's play, And Then They Came for Me, and the speaker is a Hitler Youth. As you listen, ask yourself those two questions. Monologue 1, the Hitler Youth appears and he's holding a puppy. When I am promoted in my unit of the Hitler Youth, our leaders give us a puppy, and they tell me to keep the puppy with me day and night, to feed it and care for it, to let it sleep with me, to make it my property and my responsibility. As the Führer has said, we will be one people, one nation, and the youth, we are going to be that people and that nation. Heil Hitler. In monologue 2, the speaker is still the Hitler Youth, but this time he doesn't have the puppy. After I had the puppy for about 6 months, after I had kept it with me day and night, fed it and cared for it, loved it, we were told to report to a unit meeting and to bring our puppies. Our leaders welcomed us. They praised us. They told us we were the future of Germany. And then they ordered us to take our puppies. They ordered all of us to take our puppies. They ordered us to strangle our puppies. They told us if we didn't do it, we'd never be chosen. We'd never be SS. We'd never be real Germans. I promise at all times to do my duty to the Führer. So help me God. I did what I was told. I strangled my puppy. An order is an order. Yes? I have been a member of the Nazi youth group since I was 7. I will fight in Germany's total war. It is win or die for Germany. Heil Hitler. Now, many of you probably thought that you would have nothing in common with that Hitler Youth, and yet it would not be surprising if you shared at least one attribute. Perhaps you have a pet that you love. For most students, this activity is a moment of enlightenment. Young people like themselves would be Germany's future. Let's look at another example. We know that today young people either have or want to get a tattoo, at least a number of them do. They see tattoos as art or as a way to memorialize someone or something important to them. But we know that during the Holocaust, tattoos had a very different purpose. They were used to dehumanize people. They were placed on prisoners' arms as a way of dehumanization. Consider then how the following improvisation might open a meaningful conversation about tattoos. The characters are a young teenager and his or her parents. One parent has lost family during the Holocaust. The other parent has family that their family members are survivors. And one survivor has tattoos of numbers on the arm. It's recommended that this improv be played 2 times. And of course, the conflict in the improv is that the young person wants a tattoo and the parents object. If you play it 2 times, you should switch roles. And the role reversal then can open a discussion that is facilitated by guiding questions. The questions might include, what arguments were used? What resolutions emerged? How was the sensitive nature of the grandparents' Holocaust experience treated? What issues emerged during the playing? What emotions were the strongest? And did perceptions change when the roles were switched? And if so, how? We also know that many teenagers want to have a car. So another activity that might both surprise and create thoughtful reflection is an improvisation that has at its center the Volkswagen. While many of today's young drivers want a fancy souped-up car, the teen in our improv wants a Volkswagen as his or her personal car. People today might not realize, however, that the Volkswagen came from Adolf Hitler's idea and desire that all German citizens have a people's car that they could own. So in this activity, our teen plans to buy a Volkswagen as his or her personal automobile. But the teen's grandparent, who knows why that car was commissioned and how it came to be, is opposed to the purchase. After the improv is over, ask how many were surprised to learn about the origin of the Volkswagen. Have their feelings towards this car changed? And if so, how? I know that your newest exhibit focuses upon the concentration camps. And so I want to spend some time discussing the camps and suggesting some dramatic activities that can be used in conjunction with your exhibition. These comments are not meant to be in-depth coverage at all. so please consider them just to be an overview. According to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, a concentration camp is defined as a camp in which people are detained or confined, usually under harsh conditions and without regard to legal norms of arrest and imprisonment that are acceptable in a constitutional democracy. Now, while the Nazis were not the first to use this term, it's their application of it that people typically think of. Concentration and extermination camps were a cornerstone of the Reich's attempt to rid Germany and the Reich of undesirables and misfits. What many people may not realize, however, is that there were a number of different kinds of camps. They were in various locations. They served different purposes, and they were in existence for different lengths of time. People were deported to the camps because of race, religion, nationality, or politics. Imprisoned were intellectuals, political prisoners, criminals, social democrats, communists, gypsies, inferiors or misfits, and of course the Jews. The camps were run by the SS, and they were differentiated by function. Similar to a prison, the Nazis saw the camps as a way to separate certain groups from society. Unlike a prison, however, those confined had not been convicted of any crime, nor given a release date. For millions, the only way out was death. Conditions were brutal. Death came in many forms. The most likely to perish were the youngest and the oldest, those deemed unfit for work. Interestingly enough, teenagers often fared the best. Theresienstadt is an example of an internment site that transformed from a ghetto into a concentration and transit camp. Jews were moved there from all parts of the Reich. Here's where they sent artists, musicians, actors, writers, scholars, and other important Jews from throughout the Reich. The Nazis considered Theresienstadt to be a model camp, and they showed it off to visitors as proof that the Jews were being well treated. When the Red Cross came to inspect the camp on June 23, 1944, they saw a place where artists performed, social activities were available to inmates, gardens were planted, and barracks revamped. What they did not know was that deportations had increased prior to their visit, that artists used for propaganda purposes were murdered after they left, and that the inmates were secretly recording the horrid conditions in the camp. It was from Theresienstadt that on October 30th, 1944, 2,000 Jews were deported to Auschwitz on the last train to go to the extermination camp. Of the 15,000 children detained at Theresienstadt, it is estimated that only about 100 to 150 survived. Let's pause now to consider how the arts might be incorporated into a lesson on Theresienstadt. Not everyone who's interested in theater wants to be a performer. Those interested in scenic design can be invited to create a three-dimensional model of the site. Researching the site's transformation from a ghetto to a camp can provide the accuracy that is necessary for a faithful reproduction or replica. I Never Saw Another Butterfly is a well-known book of drawings and poems created by the children of Theresienstadt. To incorporate movement into a unit about this camp, the teacher might share the poem that became the title of the book, The Butterfly. The last, the very last, so richly, brightly, dazzlingly yellow. Perhaps if the sun's tears would sing against a white stone, such a yellow is carried lightly way up high. It went away, I'm sure, because it wished to kiss the world goodbye. For 7 weeks I've lived in here, penned up inside this ghetto, but I have found my people here. The dandelions call to me, and the white chestnut candles in the court. Only I never saw another butterfly. That butterfly was the last one. Butterflies don't live in here, in the ghetto. Pavel Friedman, 1942. Participants in this lesson can then form groups, with each group being tasked with creating and performing a butterfly dance inspired by the poem. Some groups might want to use flowing material to add to their choreography. Another way of adding the arts is to have them research and add music of the period that can be used to underscore their dance. And there are several plays that can be used to add dramatic activity. These include I Never Saw Another Butterfly by Celeste Responti and Can You Hear Them Crying by Virginia Burton Stringer. Let's return to looking at the camps and focus our attention now on the most infamous death camp, Auschwitz. It was a complex mixture of camps and subcamps. Auschwitz I was a concentration camp. Auschwitz II was often called, or also called Auschwitz-Birkenau, and it was the extermination camp with gas chambers and crematoriums. Auschwitz III was a labor camp. In addition, there was a POW camp and a number of subcamps. As an extermination camp, Auschwitz-Birkenau was a killing factory, with mass murder beginning systematically on July 4th, 1942. Over the main entrance gate stood the sign which translated means, "Work will make you free." Its purpose was to deceive. It's estimated that between 1.1 and 1.5 million people were murdered at Auschwitz, with approximately 1 million of those being Jews. Between 6,000 and 7,000 people were needed to run the operation, but that's a small number compared to the number of casualties there. Both the SS and civilians worked at the camp, including guards, messenger girls, and medical personnel. I'd like to share with you 3 plays that illustrate the realities attributed to this camp. I've directed all 3 of these as Holocaust remembrance plays at Eastern Florida State College. One of these plays that puts the agonizing decisions that prisoners sometimes had to make is a play called Auschwitz Lullaby by James C. Hall. According to the publisher's description, the play is inspired by actual events recounted in inmate diaries. This play tells the story of Dr. Isaac Jonah, the pathologist. His wife and daughter were imprisoned in Auschwitz in 1944, and he worked in Dr. Joseph Mengele's laboratory. In the play, a young girl, Lena, escapes the gas chamber, and Jonah is asked to hide her and to help her to escape from the camp. His choice is agonizing, as it pits the survival of his family against the life of this innocent girl. The play leaves a profound impression, both upon the performers and upon the audience. Another play is A Train Ride Away by Frank Gibbons. This one act tells the story of a Hungarian family in 1944 being transported to Auschwitz-Birkenau. It's relatively easy to stage, as the settings are meant to be suggested rather than literal, and its title describes the subject matter. A third is Dark Road by Laura Ludgren Smith. Like the previous play, the setting is minimal, but the impact is immense. The publisher's description here describes the plot. When Greta, a young girl living in Nazi Germany, reads that a nearby women's concentration camp is hiring guards, she sees that as her chance to find her place in the world and to provide for her sister, Lise. But soon she learns the reality of her duties, and so too does she learn how to justify her crimes, heading further and further down the dark road laid by the Third Reich. A one-act, the play powerfully demonstrates how evil can become the accepted norm. If it's possible to see or to read that play, or at least excerpts that have scenes that involve both sisters, Dark Road can be used to show how character traits can be explored. In a classroom or a workshop, the participants sit in a circle on the floor. One person begins by sharing a word that describes a character trait for Lise. The person next to them says the first word and adds their own, and then so on around the circle, with each participant saying the list of words that came before and then adding their own. The character traits are then written on the board, or they can be on index cards or Post-it notes. When that's been completed for Lise, the same thing is done for the character Greta. Once we have the character traits for both of the characters in the play, then students are paired with one playing Lise and one playing Greta. They are asked to add a conflict and then to create and rehearse a scene, which can then be performed either in pantomime or using dialogue. And then after the scenes have been performed, discuss how the character traits were revealed, and consider as well how the nature of the conflict impacted the performer's choices for their characters. This activity can then lead into a conversation about the behavior of Holocaust perpetrators, as well as a discussion about plot and character in a play. If a full-scale production is not feasible, then short activities based upon monologues and scenes can be used. To illustrate this, let's look at another monologue from James Still's play, And Then They Came for Me. This time the speaker is a young girl, Eva. She is a 15-year-old Jewish teenager living in Nazi-occupied Amsterdam. My name is Eva Geringer. Today is my birthday. I am 15 years old. This morning I woke up, I went down to breakfast to open my presents, and then they came for me. After we are arrested, my family is transported to Westerbork, a transit camp, a kind of holding camp where there are thousands of Jewish and Gypsy families waiting. A few days later, they put us on another train. 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. We don't know when it is day. We don't know when it is night. The train is like cattle cars. 100 people are pushed together, lying, sitting. Sometimes the train stops. The doors open. Bread is thrown in, water for us to drink. 3 days, 4 days. It's hot, boiling hot, and the doors are closed and bolted shut from the outside. Where are they taking us? The train stops. The doors of the train open. At least we could stretch and breathe a bit of fresh air. But then we saw on the platform the sign that said Auschwitz, and we knew this was the death camps. My mother hands me a coat and hat and says, "Put these on, Evie." I put them on. The SS officer looks me up and down and finally indicates for me to go to the left. Soon, Mother joins me. I'm the youngest person left in our group. As ridiculous as I look, that hat and coat saved my life. Once the participants are familiar with the monologue, they can then move into an activity called poses. When the teacher calls pose 1, the students take a pose that shows what Eva might be thinking, feeling, or doing at the beginning of the monologue. When the teacher calls pose 2, the students playing Eva take a pose that show what she might be thinking, feeling, or doing in the middle of the monologue. And then when the teacher calls pose 3, the students take a pose that shows what Eva is thinking, feeling, or doing at the end of the monologue. Next, the participants form groups of 3. One person plays Eva, the other her mother, and the other the SS officer. This time the teacher calls pose 1, and the student playing Eva takes a pose that shows what Eva may have been thinking, feeling, or doing at the beginning of the monologue. When the teacher calls pose 2, the student playing mother joins her, and together they take a pose that shows what those characters were thinking, feeling, or doing in the middle of the monologue. And when the teacher calls pose 3, the third actor joins as the SS officer, and together the 3 create a tableau that shows what those characters were thinking, feeling, or doing at the end of the monologue. After seeing both phases of this activity, discuss how it provides insight into Eva's emotions and feelings during the monologue. Another avenue that can be explored through plays and dramatic activities is that of memory and perspective. Contact with the Enemy by Frank D. Gilroy was our Holocaust Remembrance play in 2021. And it's a wonderful vehicle for looking at this relationship. In the play, Naylor and Duffy meet by chance outside of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. They haven't seen each other in years, but it turns out that they were in the same unit during World War II. As they view exhibits and give an interview to a museum staff member, their differing memories and perspectives emerge. Holocaust memory is at the core of this play, which deals with repressed memory, false memory, and rationalization. The characters' perspectives of the same event are shaped by their ability, or lack thereof, to justify and deal with the killing of a German soldier. Was it justified? Yes, if colored by false memory. Was it murder? Yes, if colored by truth. The play raises moral and ethical questions. The issues that it poses leaves audience members thinking long after the play has ended. Contact with the enemy brings uncomfortable confrontation as self-narratives butt up against reality. People may, for example, tell themselves that they could never do what the Nazis did, that they wouldn't murder Jews, they'd rescue them. But this exchange between Naylor and Duffy highlights how rationalization and altered versions of events can lead to justifications that are necessary when the perception of self is at stake. Duffy, on the one hand, you can't compare what we did to what the Nazis did, the camps and all. Naylor, true. Now I'll just alternate. Duffy, I couldn't shove people in gas chambers, could you? No matter what. Wrong question. Why? It's too easy. Easy? You ask anyone out of the blue if they'd shove people in gas chambers, and they'll say no, and they'll mean it. Want a tougher question? Go on. You're at a meeting with business associates. They start making cracks about one guy because he's Jewish. Do you speak up? Well, do you? Yes. The guy's fired because he's Jewish. Do you protest? Yes. Do you continue to socialize with him? Yes. Even after he's forced to wear a star marking him as a Jew? What? Do you patronize his store after they break his windows? Do you offer him a ride after Jews are forbidden to drive? You offer him shelter when he's kicked out of his home? Do you ask what happened when one night he and his family vanish? What's your point? It doesn't begin with gas chambers and ovens. The point that Naylor is making is one that shouldn't be lost when it comes to contemporary issues. In the following improvisation, issues of personal safety and conscience can be explored. Further, this is another way to connect what happened during the Holocaust to issues to which a young person can relate. In this improv, we have a student that we'll call student A, and this person has witnessed another person bullying and harassing a second student. A teacher thinks that student A has seen this and wants student A to identify the perpetrator. Student A, however, fears the bully and fears retribution. Once the improv has been played, ask, did student A do the right thing? Why or why not? And then this can lead to a discussion about parallel situations that occurred during the Holocaust. Perhaps the most famous victim of the Holocaust is Anne Frank, and she is a figure to which young people can relate. Her story has been told in plays and movies, and while she is certainly not the only diarist of the Holocaust, she is the one whose name and spirit endure. Just as many teenagers do, Anne kept a diary. The following monologue is from Wendy Kesselman's adaptation of the Goodrich and Hackett play, The Diary of Anne Frank. Stage directions set the scene. Alone in her bed, Anne wakes with a start. Her shadow enormous, illuminated on the wall. She speaks out. Just as I was falling asleep, My friend Hanali appeared, dressed in rags, her face thin and worn. She looked at me with such sadness in her eyes that I could read the message in them. Oh, Anne, why have you deserted me? Help me, rescue me from this hell. If only I could. Why have I been chosen to live and you to die? Oh, Hanali, if you ever return, I'll take you in, share everything I have with you. Are you still alive? I keep seeing your enormous eyes. I keep seeing myself in your place. You're a reminder of what my fate might have been. What will we do if no, I mustn't write that down. But the question won't go away. It looms before me in total, absolute horror. In this brief monologue, Anne recounts an image that she saw just as she was falling asleep. Players can create and stage a dream that Anne might have had while she was in hiding, using the example we just had as a foundation. Her dream could be pleasant, such as her wedding or playing with childhood friends, or it could be dark and disturbing. If the latter, it's recommended that the teacher check with the groups as they're planning so as not to include gruesome content in their performance. To play, the students work in pairs or small groups, and they develop and rehearse scenes in which they perform their dreams, and then they perform for the class. After the scene has been performed, actors should share why they thought Anne might have had their dream. I've tried in this talk to share context and activities with you that emphasize how both formal and informal drama activities can be creative ways to engage in critically important Holocaust education. I've covered only a few of the topics that can be addressed this way: an overview of the Holocaust, anti-Semitism, Jewish life before the war, ghettos, camps, resistance, hiding, rescue, survivors, resettlement, and other victims are the most usually covered topics when there is a Holocaust unit studied. Imagine a person investigating these through the words of a playwright, through the eyes of a youthful protagonist, or through the emotions of a character. And just as there is diversity in the subject matter covered, so is there material that is age and content appropriate. Whether in the classroom, a workshop, or on stage, drama gives voice to the famous, the infamous, and the anonymous. The legacy of the Holocaust is sobering, and its lessons many. In drama and theater, we have powerful partners for increasing learning opportunities, fostering understanding, and moving the past into the present. Drama and theater inspire critical thinking, holistic vision, and reflection. Learning about the Holocaust through them is a notable step towards never again. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, Dr. Rubin, thank you. Thank you so very much. What just like a really powerful presentation. I think one of the last things you said where you say drama gives voice to the famous, the infamous, and the anonymous. What a powerful statement. And all of that was really highlighted in all of the very, very moving examples that you gave us. Marissa or Laura, were there any questions that were shared in the chat, or should I just move ahead with a couple of things that I wanted to talk about selfishly?
I would start, I would go ahead, please, and lead the dialogue.
Okay, great. Okay. So one of the, you said just actually toward your ending, you had talked about like checking in, like making sure what they're playing out, what the scene, the image work that they're doing is not gruesome or in some way, traumatizing to the students engaged in the activity. One of the things that I have found really quite useful in my time working with the KHC is the preference on leading students toward hope and leading students out of the darkness and into the light. Yes. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you about was how, what are some things that you do? I guess this is multi-part question. What have you found students' responses be when you are, dealing with subject matter such as this? And then what are some techniques that you use to kind of walk them in and then walk them back out? Like specifically, I was thinking about the Nazi youth piece and like what a powerful and really effective thing to connect to. So I wonder if you could just talk about that for a minute.
Well, I try with the students to give them context before we ever get into the activity so that they know that this isn't coming from left field, but there is factual lead up to what we are doing. And then I try to make sure that they have a realistic understanding. And I'll share with you a lesson that I learned doing an activity with younger children than my college students that was kind of like, oh, you have to pay attention to this because the context had not been laid properly. And the students wanted to, it was what would you bring with you if you were leaving to go into hiding? And they wanted to bring things like their lightsabers. and we did not lay the groundwork correctly for this.
Right.
And so I learned a valuable lesson about you've got to lay the groundwork.
Mm.
And then during the actual activity, I check with the groups because I want to make sure every once in a while you'll get students who wanted to, let's just, show how rough and tough we can be and how gruesome we can make this. And that's not the idea for doing this. So asking them in a nice way, do you really think this would be the case? Or how could we restructure this so that it's more realistic? Trying to get some guiding questions so that they realize, oh, we're going in the wrong direction.
Mm.
And then I think it's really important afterwards to do these reflecting questions, these guided questions, to make sure that their understanding is not only intact, but broadened.
Mm.
Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find yourself using the same techniques, whether you're in class talking about things versus when you're doing a production? Because of course, when you are living that out, it's different to feel that on your body as an actor than it is to sit in a classroom and talk about. So like, do you use similar techniques when you are directing, or maybe could you speak to that a little bit?
Pretty much similar techniques. Most of the students that I've been directing at Eastern Florida are not theater majors. So they're not really coming in with a lot of the background that a theater major might have.
Yeah.
It's a little easier to talk about the development of a character with a theater major than with somebody who isn't. But I use a lot of the same techniques, and probably as you do, I share my experiences. For example, when we did Contact with the Enemy, I've been at the Holocaust Museum with a fellowship. So I was able to really say, this is what you're talking about. This is what would happen here. And also with a lot of these things, just demanding accuracy, which I think also helps the actor get into the character. If your setting, for example, is truthful, if you're recreating the Holocaust Museum, they are in that environment. So the techniques are basically the same. The language choices might be a little bit different.
Okay. And that sort of segues into one other question I had about productions, because I'm curious, like I've, worked as a dramaturg here and there. And so I was wondering, when you do productions, have you in the past used a dramaturg? Have you done talkbacks? I know in one of the last things you mentioned about giving the audience something to really continue to digest and chew on. Have you ever found a need to do a talkback? Have you ever done talkbacks? What can you
We do a talkback here after every show. It's not every performance, but it is every show.
Yeah.
And that is run by a faculty member in psychology. And she brings in, we call them our panel of experts. So the panel consists of other faculty members or outside people such as a rabbi, and they have a panel discussion and we take questions from the audience during that panel discussion.
And can you speak to is there something that stands out for you in terms of like an audience response or an audience question? I'm just super curious as to how are these incredibly, because I found, just you reading it was a very moving experience for me. So I would be very curious how an audience, like in that collective experience, might begin then to try to process through. I don't know if you have any examples or anecdotes of that.
Just more a broad generalization, because this happens a lot, is that audience members feel compelled to talk about their experiences or their point of view. And so they feel the need to share.
Okay.
And that comes, we have community people that attend our performances as well as the students. So it's often the community people who want to share their experiences or how they processed everything. What's interesting from our students' point of view is that they will start to make the connections. It's like, oh, I didn't think of that before.
Right.
Now I see what you're talking about.
Right.
And sometimes our actors are also a part of these discussions. And one of the most interesting things to come out of this is when the actor plays the villain. For example, the actress that played Greta in Dark Road, she said, I had a terrible time with doing this role. That character is just the opposite of who I am and what I believe. And she said, I really struggled with this one.
Yeah, actually, and that's a great transition. I wrote a note about, because I loved what you said earlier in your presentation about sort of moving from this esoteric notion of the Holocaust to recognizing the humanity in the horror. And I'm curious, and this kind of connects to what you just said about the actors struggling. Like, what are some steps, like first steps that you help students with in terms of entering into that process of like playing an SS officer, like playing someone who's hurting, people, human beings into railroad cars? Like, what are some things that you do to help them into and out of that process as an actor?
Well, one of the first things that I always do with them is I use the two questions. How's this character like me? How's this character unlike me? And for how's the character unlike me? How can you get that information? Right. How the character is like you is what you already have in the bag. How the character is not like you is what you have to discover. And then I really stress, you have to play it for truth. Bad guys don't know they're bad guys. Right. And they think what they're doing is right. So
they don't get up in the morning, well, I'm going to be a bad guy today.
Yeah, exactly. And so you have to understand this is playing it for truth. This is what your character, it's not you, it's your character. And then being thoughtful if they have questions, trying to really give, honest answers about the character and try to really deal with questions that they might have. Yeah. And also let them debrief. Let them talk about how this made them feel. Ooh, right. This character, when we did Contact with the Enemy, one of our, we did Denial. And one of the faculty members played one of the leading roles. And he used to say after every rehearsal, I need to go home and take a shower. This guy is just so awful.
Yeah. It's part of the process.
Yeah, it's part of the process.
Descaling process.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm curious also about anything you might be able to share with like the Hitler Youth thing, like the whole puppy. That almost took me out because, of course, I'm an animal lover, and so I thought your example of how to for young actors or just students in general to connect to that subject matter by really connecting to their own experience. Have you had any strong, or like with that particular piece, have you had students just absolutely not able, or like they sort of enter into it and they're like, no, this is too much? Have you had to like process through or help students process through that like sort of strong resistance to like, no, I can't begin to process this information?
I haven't had that experience. I have had students take a long pause before they answer or before they talk about, okay, this is what I did. This is the choice that I made. This is the connection that I made.
Yeah.
They're sometimes not real quick to get into the discussion.
Right. So there is a question that was put in the chat. And the question is, do any of your students get overcome with emotion? And if so, how do you deal with it?
I have not had that experience, but I think possibly I haven't because I watch them very carefully in rehearsal. And we stop if it looks like it's getting to be too much. It's okay, let's take a break for a minute and we'll come back to it. And that's pretty helpful.
Right.
Many years ago, when I was just beginning this work, a colleague of mine talked about her daughter, who I believe was in middle school at the time, and they did something with the Diary of Anne Frank, and the teacher did not carefully monitor. And she said her daughter came home and was upset for days. So that's why I think it's really important to keep a critical eye.
Yeah.
If you know the groove, you
Right.
kind of see this is getting a little bit too much, take a break.
Yeah. Well, and in some aspects, that's the nature of the work itself, right? It's sort of the unzipping and the here is my humanity connecting to this other person's humanity. And so a certain amount of that emotion is really required, right? Not that as actors we speak in emotion, but rather like being able to wear that, quote unquote, for an audience to experience can be very, very difficult and can be very traumatizing for the people involved in the production themselves. So I think, as you were saying, it's that processing in and processing out is so absolutely vital, right? I've done productions in the past where it was like, okay, now it's happy time. All right, happy time. We're like, okay, it's puppies and kittens time. We're not puppies with the that heartbreak. Not that one. But yeah, like it's so important to like draw people back out. And that again, that's like one thing with the KHC, like there is always a preference of we have to end with some kind of hope, right? We can't sit in the darkness. We need to be moving, we have to look at it. We have to remember it so we can't and don't ever forget, but we also have to see where is there then hope? Where is the light out of that? So
yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody, and thank you, Janet. I mean, this has been really tremendous. And Jody, you brought something up that came up last night. I was in a meeting and I was talking about how when we bring students and students are coming through the campus exhibition, it is very intense. And as we've been evolving the tour, what we've noticed is that trying to provide all this information is actually really overwhelming. And in fact, being in the space, students are having an emotional reaction. And that in many ways, we're focusing on that reaction as a way to process what's taking place in the space. So there's no possible way they can learn about the concentration camp system in one visit, but it's the emotion that you both have been talking about for the past several minutes that's really important, that we live in a very violent culture and we are so immune to it in a way that, in fact, if we only focus on the shock and the horror, then in some respects, people tune out and are not really understanding the empathy of relating to other people who are in crisis and to really building upon that emotion. Because ultimately, it's those relationships that we spend a lot of time talking about within the Holocaust, which is how the social fabric in communities and countries actually fails. So part of this work now, as we've come to understand it at the KHC, is very much focusing on hope and is also contextualizing it for students and community members who are also experiencing violence in their own communities. And I know this is for another conversation, but also, the role of time in producing arts about the Holocaust. There's several plays that are on Broadway right now and off Broadway. And, this is very different in the cultural zeitgeist than being in a community that's experiencing genocide and mass atrocities. And what does it mean for, let's say, an organization like Sesame Street to come into the camps that are for the Rohingya who are fleeing Myanmar, and bringing education and arts to children there in a very different kind of climate than it is for us here in a university setting, to be working with students and presenting all these different various points of view and ways for them to connect. Thank you both so much. And thank you to everyone that has joined us today. We're really grateful for your support. And on behalf of the Harriet and Kenneth Kupferberg Holocaust Center at Queensborough Community College, we hope you stay safe and well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Rubin.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.